That's cool. We're good. We're good. Let's go for it. Sharpie,
All right. I love it.
welcome everyone to the inaugural episode of Taylor Primetime. I am Jay Parkin. I manage content marketing here at Taylor Guitars. Sometimes when we get a chance to do the podcast, I'm the co-host of the podcast. I got my buddy up in the corner there. His name is Chris Sharp. He manages social media for us and hangs out with me on a daily basis, which could get strange. Well, we're not hanging out these days. And we
Digitally.
got the man himself. We got the
Woohoo.
namesake on the headstock here. We got Mr. Bob Taylor. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing good. I'm busy. We're busy here. And so I'm thrilled to be busy and creative, which I really love. How
That's
about you, Sharpie?
Good, good. We're plugging away. Got a lot going on and coming up on the oven right now. A lot of pots moving around, so a lot of fun stuff going on.
Yeah,
we're all working
awesome.
from home, but Bob gets to hang out in the factory in this room we call the shed. How's the factory doing, Bob?
It's awesome, man. We started up. It's a thrill. You wouldn't believe what we have to do to start up, but we did it. And we're just compliant, you know. We're very compliant and we did a great job. And they're cleaning this place like to the top of the walls every day. I've never seen so much cleanliness in my life.
Yeah,
I
it was wild. I stopped by the shop today and there's people spraying down everything as I walk by. I'm like, is it me? Is that the reason you
Yeah.
guys? But it was cool to go back in and see everybody's really stoked and excited to be back in the shop and building guitars. So it's really fun.
That is
Yeah, for
so
9 weeks.
I know, 9 weeks. We in the parking lot, Sharpie and I, is socially distanced, had a conversation with our VP of marketing, and it was like he had hair. None of us, some of us, Bob, Sharp, take your hat off. You guys are in good shape, but the rest of us who don't shave our heads or have short hair like that, we've got this long thing going on. It's fantastic. I told my
Dude,
wife,
I did mine the other day and I'm like, okay, I just got to do this myself. So I'm like, I'm feeling it. I'm doing like the Braille version of cutting my hair. And then I go out in the pool and my wife's like, Mohawk, I'm like, did I miss a spot? She's like, yeah. So I go back and I do the next Braille version. It's like, I've just got to think my way through this. Then I got a passing score.
that is
Hey,
so
but I'm a craftsman, I have good hand skills. Just took me a couple times.
That is so funny. That's great.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Taylor Primetime. What is Taylor Primetime? Taylor Primetime is a live show that we're going to be doing on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the near future. Maybe, hey, if you guys like it, we're going to keep doing it. We are going to bring factory pros. Of course, again, we have the pro himself. We got the guy. We were lucky enough to get Bob Taylor on the first episode. And the subject for tonight's episode is Bob Taylor on 4 important innovations at Taylor Guitars. So before we get into that, let's explain just a little bit more about Taylor Primetime. So some of you, even Sharpie over here, has had a chance to actually give road shows. A road show for Taylor Guitars Roadshow. It's a time where we get to go hang out at dealers of ours, and they host Taylor pros to come in, and we get to talk, face to face with a number of people. Like sometimes it's upwards of 100 people come in, and maybe even more. I think Sharpie, you would know. Paul Tobias had a huge one once.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was a couple hundred people showed up. I think Bob, didn't you do that one out in Chicago area? I believe.
When was that?
Oh, it's years
a
back.
road show.
You and Mike
Yeah.
Osman, I believe.
Yeah, I sure
Right?
did. It was awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't understand how small that store is. That
Yeah.
store is tiny. And when you have a couple people, 100 people show up, it's like a couple hundred people showing up to like your motorhome. The show is like that. That's their store. It's the most cool store, but it's like a big living room size. They do so much out of that little space with so much heart too. I mean, Paul Tobias is like, he drank the Taylor Kool-Aid, that guy. And he
Really?
represents us so well. And they really help a lot of people play music. So it's just really, really fun to go there on that. Yeah. We did a whole
So
road trip that time. That was really good.
that's awesome. We'll have to get into that. So with this here, we're trying to bring a piece of that roadshow action to you. We're going to broaden it up a little and kind of, we don't have an hour and a half or 2 hours to talk to you, but maybe we can get 45 minutes to an hour into each episode here, and we're super excited. So first things first, Bob. We got 4 topics. We got 4 things that we've discussed that kind of really that people need to know about. We would call them important innovations, in no particular, order, I guess. Oh, by the way, I have big, loud dogs, so this is going to get exciting. So the first one, Bob, what would you say? We'll say Taylor people. Can you talk about what about Taylor people make Taylor guitars tick?
Are you talking about people here
Yeah.
at the factory?
Yeah.
Not like Taylor people out there that are playing. So Taylor people here at the factory.
Right here at the factory.
They're happy. They dig this job. They give it all. I'm going to tell you. Well, let me just say this. Every time I give a tour to people, and I do it often, I give tours all the time, and I give people this tour. We wrap up, and what do they say at the end of it? Do they go, "Man, your guitars are awesome," or "The wood is great," or no? That's not what they say. They always say every single time, "Where did you get those people?" I'm not kidding you. That's what they say. I noticed when I walked through, it felt so welcoming. Nobody was bothered that we were kind of up in their grill watching them. I've taken people on tours where someone will come up and go, "Hey, you want me to show them this place, Bob?" And you're like, "Yeah." So wind them up, let them go. They know their job. They love the company. They stay here a long time. We've had 12 people now retire from a full career at Taylor. I never would have thought that would have happened when I was 19 years old starting this, that I would even retire, let alone someone who'd work for me. They're just great. The vibe here is good, really good.
On the podcast that we did with you and Kurt on the From the Factory podcast, you can see the sign behind me, by the way. I didn't take it down because we've been doing live podcasts here as well. But you and Kurt, you have a wonderful partnership. And that was one of the things that you spoke to real clearly, that you couldn't do this without your partnership with Kurt. Can you explain that a little?
Well, people say, or they ask me, "So what's the secret behind Taylor guitars? Like, what's the secret?" And I go, "Mine and Kurt's partnership. That's the secret, you know." And it's something that happened just kind of by luck, by happenstance. So it's a discussion Kurt and I have said. Some of these things in your life you totally control, but we came together by accident. We were really young, and it was just a lucky strike. I mean, it was just like a total grand slam. And what's special is he does a thing and I do a thing, and we let each other do it. And over the years, we've both gotten good at what we do. I mean, how good was I at manufacturing at 19? How good was Kurt at finance, marketing, and sales at 21? How good were we both at that? And we both managed to get good, but we let the other one do their job. And if you ask Kurt, I've heard him say many times, he's like, "My job here is to find the money and the business space for Bob to do the thing he does." And I'll go, "My job here is for Kurt to tell me whether we're making money or not," because I have a hunch he's the only one I believe. Actually, we have a really great staff right now that's gotten good, but they've worked under his tutelage for a long time. And these are people that are smarter than him about it, but he's got that ownership feel.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The wisdom. We both remember how we made the money, how we made the business work, the hard times. And I don't want to go down a super long historical road of we carved necks in the snow uphill both ways, but but it's nice that we're both still here because we sort of know where we came from, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, Sharp, you've been here for so much longer than me, right? I just hit my four year anniversary, and it was like, wait, what? I've been here for 4 years. That went by quickly. I mean, you've been here for going on 12. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Next month is 12 years for me. And that doesn't make sense. Right. And I've talked about to people on tours when I go out and do road shows, or we do dealer training events called TGUs. And I always talk about this everywhere I go is I've worked for Taylor Guitars for going on 12 years, and I haven't had a bad day yet. And that just speaks to what Bob says about all of us having fun in what we do. You know, you get up in the morning and you go in, you really enjoy your job, but you enjoy the people you're with. I love what I do. I love the guitars we make, but the people is making it so much fun. And that makes the days go by so fast. You're like, oh my gosh, like I was 22 when I started here. And now I'm like, all right, I'm here for a while. You know, it's been cool.
that's yeah,
Yeah, you're a real come upper, you
Yeah.
know, because you came out. I wasn't your first job like just being assistant to Katrina, or what was your first job? You're working down. You've had a lot of different spots, but remind me your history. What's the first thing you were doing?
Oh yeah. So I actually came in from Chris Nordby over in
There
sales.
you go.
We were both in the music scene in San Diego, and we had known each other. And he goes like, "Hey, there's a position over here at Taylor. Like, it's your foot in the door. Come on in." And down at 1700, which was one of our buildings that we worked out of, I was answering phones and assisting sales and
Yeah,
customer service, you know,
right.
getting in there. And I remember on my very first day, you came up to me and you're like, "Hey, how's it going? I'm Bob." And I was like, "Hey, I'm Chris." And then the next day coming in, just walking past to go, because I think Kurt's satellite office was down there when we were doing construction or something. And you're like,
Yeah.
"Hey, Chris," and just walk by. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, the owner's here, remember everybody's name and all that stuff." So it was cool, you know, and
What?
it's so casual, but so professional, which has always been so much fun working for you here.
Yeah, you don't have to worry until I start calling you Buckaroo. It's like, hey, Buckaroo. Right now, when people work in my building, I'm like, okay, dude, I got to ask you your name like 6 times. You just have to forgive me, but I'm gonna just keep asking
Yeah.
until it's drilled home.
hey,
But names are important. It's worth working on,
yeah, that's so
right?
awesome. All right, so the people at Taylor, your partnership with Kurt, we have an incredible staff. I would say all of us are, you know, like Chris says, happy to go to work every day. Um, but I think Monday, and we'll get into one of these questions, but when we saw the production staff come back, I think we were all the happiest. I can say in marketing, um, Chris and I are both in the marketing department, but I would say this for sales too. And sales and marketing, I think our number one goal through this work at home, stay at home, COVID-19 situation that we're in right now, that our number one goal was to get people back. Get
Mhm.
the people, the guitar makers, the people who just make the beautiful instruments under yours and Andy's and Ed's, guidance.
Chris,
Chris, I mean,
Chris Wellens, all these guys.
amazing. Our executive team is great, and it's super super fun time. But Bob, I don't think that we could make these instruments without your joy, your love, your factory. I know
No,
some
thanks.
I know sometimes you call it your shop, but
Yeah, I do.
you're the factory guy, Bob. Talk about that.
Well, I love factories. I love every kind of factory there is. You know, when I first started making guitars, I instantly kind of went a little bit different direction from other people who were making guitars. And believe me, back in those days, I say we made guitars with lumber store wood and hardware store tools because there wasn't like this big thing developed at that time. And there were guys that really wanted to hand make guitars, but I just love machines. I love processes. I'd seen factories do good work before. And then the other thing is I wanted to bring people in. And so, I mean, you get to do that when you grow. you develop a factory. I remember, I don't know, maybe I was in business 10 years or so, and I visited the Mercedes factory in Sindelfingen, and it was like no stone left unturned inside that place. And I thought, you know what? They make that car because they developed a process to do this kind of stuff. Top quality work, right? And it's like super inspired me. It's like, I'm going to go home and take things and make processes so that we can bring regular people with a smile on their face and have some hand skills in, and we can make good guitars, right? You still have to have a lot of guitar knowledge in there to do that. But it's like when I told Andy, it's when I was trying to woo him into us, I go, and the deciding factor for him is like, Andy, what you're doing now is cool. I totally respect it. And you make 12 musicians a year happy, right?
Yeah.
But if you come here, you could actually affect which way the wind blows around the world, and you could make 150, 200,000 musicians a year happy and affect what the state of the art of guitars go, which way it goes. And he went home and thought about that, and he's like, yep, that's convincing. I can help more people play if I work from here instead of my incredible life I have working out of my garage shop. And it literally was a garage. It's just how many people can you serve?
Yeah. And it's fun. Chris and I both get to, when we're open to the public and we get to give tours, we get to tell some of these stories that, we're probably playing a really wicked game of telephone, right? Where the story is probably stretched one way or the other.
Well, my story's the truth, and you just add your stuff to it, I think, right?
That's how it works.
Yeah. It's exactly how it works. But there's a couple of good stories that I've had, Bob. Giving a tour once in the laser room, right? We have wood sorting, and we have the pallets of wood and all the necks being stickered and so on and so forth. There's these carousels, okay? And these carousels, what they're doing is we're book matching tops and backs, or mainly backs, and it's a carousel. You clamp it in there, and it's like one full rotation, and it's dry, and it's ready to go to the next step. And I had a guy who asked me a question, and I told him I will ask Bob this in a public forum someday, so I'm going to ask you. He said to me, that tool looks like a Home Depot special. And I said, you know what? This is the part of the tour where we talk about how Bob Taylor is actually more stoked about the manufacturing and the tools we get to use to manufacture guitars than he is the guitars itself sometimes. Talk about tooling. Talk about this. Back when you used to build a guitar by day and then go home at night and build a tool to make the next guitar easier to build. And is that carousel a Home Depot special?
Well, it's bar clamps from a hardware store and some round tubing and angle iron from, the junkyard down the street, and weld it up until it looked like a tool, but it works. And now if you see the other carousels we have in the factory, ooh, they're the bomb, because we have a complete engineering tooling staff. But that old carousel was made a long time ago. Do you know that in the factory up in side bending, I have the original pipe bender with a barbecue lighter in that I made in high school to bend my sides on the first guitar I made. We still bend purfling strips on that thing today. It's just crazy. And there's a big long belt sander in the body department. We call it a stroke belt sander. It's what we sand the tops with after the guitar body's put together. And yeah, I made that thing when I was 22 years old, taking night classes after work in Lemon Grove, going over and building machines, that would make guitars a little bit better. But every time I build a guitar, I think, I just realized that every day would be Groundhog's Day for me if I didn't improve the process. And so I would make a tool let's say I'd work for 8 hours, and then I'd work another 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. Greg Daring from Daring Banjos, his shop was next to mine, and our wives would call each other. I was I started single. I got married when I was 22, and Janet would call Cindy. Cindy would call Janet. Have you seen Greg? Have you seen the boys? No, they're down there probably building machines. We'd be doing that till midnight every night, and yeah, I just built machines. Sometimes it was nothing more than it wasn't always machines, it was tools. Maybe if I had to measure something 50 times, why use a tape measure? I'd make a stick of wood with 2 pencil marks on it, and then I'd put it down and that was my measurement. Or sometimes it was a little pattern cut out of shape and made from cardboard. Then that turned into plexiglass. And one day it turned into a computer controlled laser, to cut out of shape. So it just grew over the years. But I love the tools that we make. And of course, my office is here in the tooling department, and so is Andy's. So we have our research development, our new products, all of our sort of R&D Frankenstein things that we make, and then our engineering and all of our tooling. And man, I love walking through there and seeing freshly cut metal that's all precise and going together.
Yeah, it's a part of the factory that we don't get to give a public tour on, but if you ever get the inside scoop and you get to go over there and hang out in our tooling department, to talk about a room of, you feel not so smart when you walk into that room. You're in the marketing department, you get to tell stories, right? And we get to talk, and we get to build interest in these instruments. But then you walk in there and you see, anyone from an MIT grad to working on CAD and 3D renderings of these ideas that Bob and or Andy has in his head. It's just wild. It's a wild, super fun experience to be a part of that. The tooling engineers, and I mean, did you ever think you would have a tooling department?
Yes.
Nice.
It just, but I didn't know how big it would be. It's like people like, when did you ever realize that your company would be the size it is today? And I'm like, last year, that's when I realized that, so you take it a step at a time. But yeah, every new week, every new month, every new year at Taylor was just a little bit of a push forward, I remember when cordless tools came out. Can you imagine a world? You probably don't even know a world that doesn't have a cordless like Makita drill.
Oh man, I do. He probably doesn't.
Chris doesn't. I do.
Yeah.
And I remember when they first came out, I bought myself one, and me and Kurt would, well, mostly me, Kurt would help, would set up our NAMM show booth. I'm like, here, hold that in, Kurt. And I had this whole thing designed, and we'd put it together. And I showed up in Chicago with this cordless drill. And next thing you know it, for like a 50-yard radius around me, people are coming and going, what's that? Hey, can I borrow that screwdriver? Hey, can I borrow your screwdriver? I'm like, yeah, I'll give it, just bring it back, but it was crazy. I remember that day like it was yesterday, just moving ahead.
That's incredible.
And I think a lot of our players might know about Tom Anderson guitars. Incredible guitars, small shop, 20 guitars a week. Most of them go to pros, you see them all the time, but he's the one who showed me what a Fadal was. It was Tom who did that, and
Really?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
He came down for a tour once. He came down here. He's like, man, him and I got to know each other a little bit. And he's like, I hear you make some really cool tools. And I did make cool tools. And he came down and spent like a morning, and I'm showing him all this stuff. And I got to this fret gang saw. It was like this big long arbor, right, that has all the saws in it cut. If you run your piece of wood past it, and there's boom, all your fret slots are cut, right? And this factory came out of, people remember Harmony guitars, and maybe some of you remember K guitars, but this thing came out of the K guitar factory from back in like the 40s. It was a casting, and I managed to get it from this old guitar builder named Bojo Budanovac, who made 12 strings that guys like Leo Kottke played back when I was a kid, right? And he had this stuff, and I bought this junk from him for almost nothing. And I restored this machine. I was so proud of it. And I look at Tom and I go, well, how do you cut your fret slots? And he goes, well, I have this computer controlled CNC mill and I just program in where they go and it cuts it. And I'm like, tour's over. We're going to your place. I got nothing left to show you.
These
And
are the
I swear we finished that tour, and the next day I drove up to Newbury Park, which is north of LA.
yeah.
And I was the next week I was up there and I looked at that Fidal machine, and his friend named Dave Schechter, who's known in this industry, Dave closed down his company and he went to work for Fidal when they were there. And one day, and Tom had worked with Dave, and Tom was winding pickups on his kitchen table, starting to get a business going, and he started making guitars. And Dave Schechter calls him one day and goes, Tom, I'm working for a company that makes the machine that I would make if I made a machine for building guitars. You got to come check it out. So Dave Schechter turned Tom onto it because he was working at Fidal. Tom bought one. I went up and saw one, and it's like, this is my future. It's my future right here. I got to buy this machine. A month later, I had the first one. I don't know. We must have 60 of them now, but it changed our lives because it catapulted us into the modern world. So we were able to bring that type of machinery in CAD was a more clear transition from what we thought to what we could make than all of the rigmarole we would have to go through to get there before.
Yeah,
I'll give somebody an example. Here's a real good example. Draw a line on a piece of wood. Now, how wide is that line? Do I cut in the middle of that line, on the left side of that line, or the right side of that line? Do you see how inaccurate a pencil line is? But when you draw a line in a CAD system and go tell to cut to that line actually has no dimension. It's infinitely non-dimensioned in a CAD system. It's a point in space. And so you can tell how far away from that line you want it to be right on it. So things are dead nuts. So if you just say, I just want to put fret slots in, wow, that's worth it right there. Now there's another 10,000 things that it's worth it. And so we can imagine things to build now because we can imagine a way to build it, where before our imagination was always stifled because it was our hand skills that were the only way that we could get her done, right? You can develop really good hand skills. But this
we got a good question. We got a good question here from the live feed.
Yeah.
When did CAD/CAM start at Taylor? So when did we start doing
1989. 1989. I don't remember dates very well, but I remember that one.
Yeah,
like I have a friend
awesome.
who remembers years, and I don't remember years. And he's like, yeah, I remember that was 63 because the Beatles put out I mean, the whole thing, he can trace everything down to like this date, right? But 1989, we bought that first one. And it was literally, I had an IBM AT computer with floppy disk drives, right? And you'd have to turn it on and boot it up. And then this black screen would come on with a C:\\, and you would type a command. And then I'd put a Mastercam floppy disk in and it would come up, and I had a mouse by then. And it was like, they're just stared at you. There's no owner's manual. There's no tutorial. It just was like a black screen and this menu down one side. And it's like, okay, well, create. Okay, let me click on create. And then it would be like rectangle, sphere, circle, line. I'm like, line? And I click on line and it would go endpoint, midpoints, coordinates. And I go coordinates, and just that's how I learned how to do it.
Chris, were you born in 1989?
Oh man, I was 4.
That is fantastic. Well, what's cool.
It was a couple of years before I started working at Taylor, we'll say.
That's good. That's good. That's awesome. That's awesome, Bob. So we've innovated a lot of things, right? We talk about innovations. We talk about the Taylor neck, which was originally the new technology, NT neck, right? We talk about, I've recently heard a really good side bending cutaway story about how the Florentine cutaway was created, it's a good story. I might ask you that maybe in a later episode or even this episode. But of those innovations, you always talk about, there's one thing that you say that's very inspiring, that whenever we create or build a new instrument or new guitar, we have to build a new factory. What do you mean by that?
Well, let's take the the Taylor neck, which came out as sort of the NT neck. That was sort of the accidental name. We in the factory, we really tried not to call something because that's the name that sticks. You know, it's like Harvey, oh man, you know, or project whatever, that type of thing. And NT sort of stuck as new technology. We eventually grew up and it became the Taylor neck because the technology wasn't that new after 20 years, right? But when I did that one, it wasn't just a neck, it was also the way we built the body, everything about it. And so almost everything but the pencil had to be rebuilt. We had, and we don't use a lot of pencils except for to make notes. But the thing is we had to build all new molds to make bodies, all new, everything that holds that, how this stuff comes together, how accurately it comes together, because it wasn't just a neck slapped on an old body, it was a neck on a new body. And so we had to build this factory off to the side. I wouldn't say that every time anymore, but some of our innovations really mean that you need to start all over. And also when we design a new guitar now, we try to take advantage of that to try something new, to try a new technology. So when we look at innovations, there's really innovations that benefit the customer in them having a guitar that performs better. Sometimes it's an innovation in how we make guitars, which allows us to perform better. And if we can perform better, well, we get to stay in the United States, earn a living, make a guitar that's a high quality guitar, and we're not constantly wooed by some cheaper labor place that we can run to, have a copy of our guitar made. So even in Mexico, we own that factory. We built that from the ground up, and everybody there is a Taylor employee, and it's 30 minutes away from here. But there's a lot of innovations that we've done. And in reality, a lot of the innovations that we've done at Taylor in how we build has then affected what we build, because our possibilities have expanded. For example, the neck that we talk about, you can't build that neck by hand. It can't be built with chisels. It's way, way, way too complex and way, way, way too precise for it to be built in any other way. So it was only innovation in how we build, like getting that day with Tom Anderson, ended up with that neck, because 15 years later, I'm like, wow, I can use this machine to make something that I've never been able to make before. So I kind of think of innovations as, let's say, V-class bracing. Andy's innovation isn't a method by which we build a guitar more efficiently. It's a method that makes a guitar work better, right? And so that innovation is something that changes the guitar. And in fact, our neck changed the guitar. It wasn't built primarily to come up with a new method that gave us a methodology advancement. It gave us a better guitar advancement, because that neck can come off and go back on. It can always be right. People have to understand, if I send a guitar to Tampa Bay and another guitar goes to Aspen, Colorado, those guitars are going to live in totally different humidity. And over a period of time, one top's going to swell up, one top's going to shrink down. The neck angle doesn't necessarily go along with that. It might need to be adjusted. And for us to be able to be like, 1, 2, 3, don't even take the strings off. A good service tech can put new shims in. There you go. You have an Aspen, Colorado guitar right now. Or maybe someone says, I used to do fingerstyle, but I want to do bluegrass. We're like, and they're like, I played some old guitars that had the neck diving in, and it kind of sounds good. Oh, we can make your neck dive in. We can make high stiff action for playing in the first 7 frets and hitting a guitar hard. You can change the guitar for a style of music. It's kind of cool. So as guitar builders, we get all jazzed about that. And I would say that most players don't take advantage of that. But we have a bail bondsman here in San Diego named King Stallman, and the ads on the radio is, it's better to know King Stallman and not need him than to need King Stallman and not know him, you know. And in a way, the bail bondsman and the neck that's adjustable are the same thing. It's better to have a adjustable neck that you don't need than to need one and you don't have it. Right.
Yeah, I came from retail. There's a period of time where I was living in Chicago, and I worked in a suburb of Chicago at the Sam Ash Music in Buffalo Grove. And
Yeah.
um, you know, Bob knows, because whenever he tells stories about Jean Lervet, I get really I perked up, because I had a Lervet, I loved playing it, and they were easy for me to sell at this store particularly.
Super guitars.
It's a wonderful guitar. And then one day I walked in, and the Taylor rep was there. And the Taylor rep was there, and it was weird because he was like sitting on his knees on the floor, and he had a guitar, and he had his hand in the guitar, and he was fiddling around with something, and all of a sudden he popped the neck off. And I said, "Wait, what?" And he popped the neck off, and I'm like, "What are you doing? I don't know who you are. Why are you breaking the screen?" He's like, so I'm from, from Taylor, and I'm here. Did you know that this was a bolt-on neck, and how this all worked? And it was like, boom, mind blown, right? And after that moment, he gave me, I'm not wearing it, but he gave me a gray Taylor work shirt with a patch on it, and I wore that. He gave me two so I could rotate them, and it didn't smell that bad. But from that day on, it was the easiest guitar for me to sell, because I come from more of an electric guitar world, and I realize, no, you can set this up for you. And in a further episode, we're going to have Rob McGargle on here and talk about the perfect setup of a guitar. But for this one, let's continue talking about innovations. Once in a conversation, I asked you, Bob, what is the most this is how you said it, so we'll get into this in a second, but I said, what's the most innovative thing that you've done at Taylor Guitars? And you said, hired Andy Powers.
Yeah. Andy's like,
So, for our number 3 on the short list of innovations, tell us about Andy Powers. What makes him so special, and why is he so important for you at Taylor?
Andy's the best guitar builder alive on earth today. It was a miracle that I found him. People have probably read the story, but I realized I needed someone like him. And I made this list of things that I needed. They're impossible. And one day Andy showed up. I'm going to really shorten that whole thing. And but Andy he sees it in his mind. He's that, yeah, we all know about the 10,000 hours you have to put into something. Well, Andy has his 10,000 hours in on chisels. He has his 10,000 hours in on understanding acoustics. He has his 10,000 hours in on the history of, instruments. You name some lute made in 1512, and he's like, oh, I know the guy who did it, and here's why he did it, and this is what he was thinking. You have like the Helmholtz book on sound that's like, this thick and paperback, and it's like, most people, you have to be a straight up Goonie engineer to read this thing, or a acoustician or something like this, if that's how you say it. And that's Andy's like, it's in his backpack, and he's like, let me reference this. I've gone through it so many times, I have to buy a new one, so he understands this stuff. And he's a killer player, and he's a bit of a savant. He just sees it in his mind, and he sees it in his mind because he's so well practiced and talented. He's just a miracle. So yeah, our guitars are better. He's a better guitar builder than me, and our guitars are better because of him. And him and I are a pretty good dynamic duo, because I can teach him how to make a lot of those guitars, right? Not just one or two. And he's a fast study. He's really figuring it out. But even, to this day, I don't have to do it as much, but it's kind of like, Andy, we got to make a process. We have to make a process for doing this thing that you just designed. And soon he won't need my help, which is why I'm free to do so many other things, like planting trees or figuring out legal sources of wood or sustainable sources of wood or this type of thing. But my association and my time that I get to spend with him are incredible. I don't know how he thinks of what he thinks of. He pulls it out of the air and it works. It just, his stuff works. He reminds me of the stories you hear of Beethoven when he would write symphonies after he lost his hearing.
Yeah.
He didn't have to physically hear it for him to be able to put these notes on paper and write incredible pieces of music. He didn't have to hear it to do it. And if you can understand that that's true, because it is true, you can understand that there are people like Andy who can go, I know what I want a guitar to sound like, and I know what to do to make it sound that way. That's hard to believe because we've all grown up in this. In fact, a lot of times in marketing, you see it all the time. I can see it on a GoFundMe, and a guy's making a whatever, I don't know, it's going to be a frying pan, you know, and he says, we had to do 119 prototypes to get to this one. And I'm like, well, that's because they don't have Andy working for them, because he doesn't need no freaking 119 prototypes.
No.
He makes one and you're like, that's good. And he goes, I'm going to make another one. And then he'll go, okay, that one's good. You know, I'm going to change this on it. And he knows what to do. And it's interesting. So I don't think that Beethoven wrote down notes until they happened to land in the right place by trial and error. He did it purposefully. I compare him to that, you know. And when people brag about all the prototypes they made, I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the way I made guitars, you know. But someone better came along, and that's Andy.
Yeah, that's it. He's spectacular. I mean, Chris, I don't know if you remember, maybe it was last year, in January this year at NAMM, we launched the Builder's Edition collection of guitars. One of the instruments he was working on was the first Grand Concert Builder's Edition, the 912 CE. And he had a couple of them, and we had to go down to film something. I can't remember why we were there exactly, but he had a couple of them, and it was like the back bracing on guitar A and then the back bracing on guitar B were like something crazy, like 100,000ths of an inch difference. And he's sitting there with he's like a kid in a candy store, right? Like, do you hear the difference, the control that we can make? I mean, it's like you laugh when we're all, we all love what we do, but I mean, it's like he's truly special. And I don't think there's anybody. I had so we were talking about this before we went live. Working on a music project right now, a video project that we're working on, and I needed some stuff. Gabe O'Brien, who's in the comments over here, and I are working on this thing, and we thought it would be a good idea to find somebody to play pedal steel. And so I shot Andy a text and I said, hey, can I film you and record you playing pedal steel? And he's like, sure. You know what else would be cool? An accordion. Yeah, because you know how to play accordion. He's like, of course I know how to play accordion. And then he said, and you know what else would be cool? A banjo. I have this really cool Deering banjo that we're going to use. And he brings it in. Anyway, we didn't get the accordion because he didn't have it, but we recorded him playing these instruments. And it's not only is he, a wonderful builder, incredible designer, very inspiring, just like you. He does walk around with this nerdy book. I mean, it's wild. But he is a killer player. I mean,
He's a good player. He's a good player.
It's crazy. Chris, do you remember the first time you heard Andy Powers play and your reaction? It's one of those kind of things, right?
Yeah. I mean, the first time I ever met Andy, I think sales and marketing was together in a room, and Bob, you brought him in. You're like, hey, everyone, this is Andy Powers. He's a better guitar builder than me. We're just like, what? Like, who's this guy? And in my mind, it was like 5 years ago. And I think he's been here, probably 10 now. Everything's 5 years ago now to me at 10. Yeah. He's going by. But him coming in and playing, it was incredible. And I always talk about it when I do tours or events or anything like that. It's like, oh, and he can probably make his own surfboard, and I know he's a ripping surfer, and he's going to go do that, and he's really good at this, and this. And the worst part of all is he's the most humble guy in the world. It's just like he's that total package of knowing everything and having the ability to play and speak from every angle of being a musician and builder. That's perfect. You picked the perfect guy to take that spot so you can go focus on sustainability, reforestation, and all of that. So, I mean, we're really excited. I mean, what's the next 45 years with him in there? It's going to be great.
It's wild. It's
Well,
wild.
it just happened with Andy, kind of like the way it happened with Kurt. It's just you couldn't invent him. You couldn't invent us meeting. You couldn't invent the right time, the right place. And there have been a lot of things in my life. I'll just say it's a God thing, but I get what I need when I need it, not before, not after. It just kind of comes when I need it. And that hasn't happened 100 times, but there's a few times in my life where it's just the right thing happened. And I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. I was just moving down the road, right? I knew what I wanted with Andy, but I had no idea how to get it. And there he was.
And
Just appeared.
you tell the story about having a checklist. Did you really have a checklist? Like a check?
Oh, absolutely. I made a checklist. I sat down. It was like, the thing is, I don't save stuff. I don't save anything. If my sister or mom don't show up with a picture of me when I was little, I don't have one. Someone else has got to save that kind of stuff. The guitar that we have that I made in high school that's up in our museum was one of 3. I destroyed the other 2. I put cherry bombs in them. The only reason that one survived was because someone else had it for a while, right? And so I don't have the actual list, but I made it. And it was like, dear God, I need one guitar builder. Who? And then I just went down the list, and the qualifications were like, is a better guitar builder than me, never worked in a factory, was self-taught, who understands the deep history of guitars and stringed instruments, who's a pro player, can play with anybody, jump on stage with anybody, anytime, and play, who's a great guy, who could make a 40-year commitment, lifetime commitment to this, who lives in San Diego. I mean, it's just like, it's all impossible, right?
Yeah,
And he's half Taylor.
I know.
People don't even understand that his name is Andy Taylor Powers, because his mom's side of the flower, his mom's a Taylor. And not only that, his grandfathers and great grandfathers on the Taylor side were all industrial inventors. They held patents to all these machineries for doing really special things in the development of engines and airplanes and all this kind of stuff. He's still got all those drawings. So he came from good DNA, good stock.
Man, it's awesome. It's so good. My favorite though is I believe somewhere in the story of the checklist is that you had one that he must have 20 years of experience but be under the age of 30.
Yeah, I honest, I swear, I won't say my mother's grave because she's still alive, thankfully. But I said 20 years of experience, less than 30 years old. And Andy came to us at 28 years old. He made his first instrument at 7, right? So I even got an extra year out of that. And he's from San Diego.
I know.
There he was. So I always said, his dad's name's Chuck. And I'm like, hey, Chuck, thanks for raising my son. You really did a great job.
That's awesome. I was blown away one time. I went to a Zach Brown concert down at the amphitheater down here in San Diego, and I had no idea it was going to happen, but they called and Andy came out on stage and played with them. Like, huge amphitheater, sold out show. And I was like, hey, I know that guy. It was awesome.
Yeah, Zach loves to play guitar with Andy. If Andy's there, he's like, dude, come out on stage and play with us. Andy can hang. He can hang with anybody.
I mean, he's a ripper. And today, just today, who can play pedal steel? Andy can play pedal steel. Who can play banjo? Andy can play banjo. You need something to play. Andy can play it anyway. So you touched on it just a minute ago, and so that we can keep this thing on schedule and we don't go forever, because Bob, you're inspiring and we could talk to you forever. You know that. But you touched on it. Andy's here to free you up to do other things. And one of those things is,
To die.
Jeez.
Because that's going to happen, and I can see it from here.
That's what we talked
I'm
about.
65.
There's that. This is another reason why we love working at Taylor, because Bob and Kurt, they're real people that come to work every day. And all jokes aside,
Man.
in our podcast with Coy Bowles from Zach Brown Band, Bob's going to die in the factory, and you could cremate him up and throw him in a finish and call it Bob's Ash Burst.
Yeah, grind me up. Spray an ash burst.
Spray Bob on a guitar and we're going to be good to go, and it's going to be wonderful. Not to get morbid, but
spring is that a spring or a fall limited? I can't remember.
we don't know where we're at yet.
Maybe it's the dark of winter limited. I don't know.
It's so great. You're always inspiring, Bob. Anyway, sustainability. Becoming more sustainable as a company has been a focus of yours for the few years. I was lucky enough to be able to go to Cameroon with you, and we're working and filming, and we filmed documentary film and telling some stories over there. And what made you think? What made you think, hey, if we don't plant more trees, we're not going to have guitar wood for the future, or we're going to have to do something? Where did that all come from? You spoke about before, when you were young, you just went down to the wood guy and bought some wood and then made an instrument. You didn't know anything when you started, but what made you want to get into that?
Well, growing up, you should grow up, right? So people should grow up, and actually businesses should grow up. They should grow up, and they should get better, older, wiser, more mellowed, more aged, and so partly is our success, our growth. If I was a 5-man shop, I wouldn't be planting trees. I wouldn't have time or money to do anything like that. But we always feel like Taylor, it's a company. What should the company support? It support its shareholders, of course, its employees, of course, its customers, of course, its suppliers and vendors, of course. And the fifth one is the community around them. That's who a corporation should serve, right? That's what a company should serve. If the company's large and all your dreams come true and you get what you wanted out of it, you need to remember those things and make sure you're serving those, not just serving the shareholder, or not just serving the client. People say the customer is always right. Well, no, they're not. Everybody knows that. But that doesn't mean you don't serve them. And the shareholder's not always right, and the employee's not always right. So just as you grow and get more mature in these types of things, I find myself deeper and deeper out in the world, maybe needing more wood, but also wanting to get closer to the source, because we want to make sure that it's done properly, it's done right. And so one thing leads to another. So even on the day that I went to Cameroon and I bought this ebony business, I wasn't thinking I would be planting trees.
Right.
I didn't think that we would be replanting those. I thought, man, this is a tiger by the tail. I just want to make it legal. I just want to make sure that the ebony that I'm getting, that it's legal, that there's no wood, but also wanting to get closer to, there's no like backstory going on there that's not true. And so one thing led to another, and it's like, we got to plant trees. We just have to plant trees. And then again, it was a chance meeting. The fact that I was able to meet Tom Smith from UCLA, who said, hey, I can help you do that if you'll fund it, right? And so we put together the Congo Basin Institute, which he had already started, but he didn't have a project yet. And we did these things, and it just sort of grew into that.
Yeah.
With gusto, you know what I mean? And sometimes you don't know exactly. A lot of times I go, I know my future's there. That's the direction I have to go. And then things sort of happen along the path, so growing trees has really been important to us. And we've been able to do more of that. Our company in Hawaii, we're ready to plant trees. It's taken a while to get the tree stock from the good, to make sure that the seeds and the plants that we have are right. I had to buy 600 acres of land to have some place to plant them. Plus we do work for other people, but we're, 40 years from now, there'll be enough koa on that plot of land that we have now that will handle Taylor's needs, and could probably do most of North America's guitars needs for koa, sustainably. So you got to be able to think way out there.
It's cool.
Yeah, you often do that. It's almost like you see where you want to go and you go there. So we've got ebony, and we've got and for everybody who's watching, I see all your comments, and I'm trying to comment with you. You got some great questions. We're going to dive into that in a second. But
we might have to do rapid fire, Jay.
We may have to do rapid fire questions. We'll do that. We can do that.
Yeah.
We can work. Anyway, so we've also started a new initiative with some forestry, and that's the urban wood initiative. Can you chat about that real briefly, and then we'll go into some questions, and we'll wrap this first Primetime up.
Super brief. I took 6 colleagues on the YouTube channel. You can find the World Forestry Tour. That was 2017, this time of year. We did it in April and May. I took 6 colleagues. We went around the world for 30 days. We were gone. We went everywhere, and we visited reforestation operations that we thought we would admire and learn something from. We came back from this, and these weren't all Taylor colleagues. These were colleagues that I work with outside of Taylor that are all part of the wood gathering and the wood milling and the cutting, this type of stuff. And when I got back, I started thinking about the trees that were just in our neighborhoods and in our cities. And I remember just making a comment like, wouldn't it be cool if we could use more trees that are here? And not only that, get human beings who have a piece of property like a backyard and have a watering hose to plant a tree that has some type of end-of-life use, because we're all sort of have fallen into ornamental planting. It's our first consideration when we plant anything anymore. Hardly anybody. I also converted my house at that same time to growing food. So now I have food. I want these plants to give me something. So anyway, Scott Paul, who was on this trip with us, he's our director of natural resource sustainability, 14 years director of the forest campaign at Greenpeace, Washington, D.C. This is a guy, it's 35 years of conservation policy. And I said, hey, Scott, what about these trees that are growing around here? And Scott sends me an article about somebody local that's cutting down trees and making stuff with it. Next thing you know, Scott is like tapping into this urban tree conversation world around. I mean, in the EU and in DC, US Forest Service involved, but no one knows how to get from the idea to something being made out of it. Well, turns out that an incredible arborist that reminds us of Taylor guitars, same age, same size, same growth pattern. Me starting the company with Kurt with nothing, and this guy starting this company with a chainsaw on his back, right, has grown into this incredible place. And they've been collecting the logs and deciding not to just mulch them. Could they make maybe they can make slab tables out of them, maybe something. So we hooked up with them. They have contracts for 7 million trees in the state of California. They have 300 cities that they have contracts to take care of those cities' trees, and that also means removing trees. Yeah. So anyways, that's dumb luck again, because there's no other person in all the United States that's like them. There's no other person like them. No other. It's a big deal. They have a 20-acre log yard in the middle of Los Angeles of trees that are down that we're finding different uses for. So they're getting the trees, they know how to do it, and they're in our backyard. They're right here. So we picked the chamois ash, we call urban ash, and it's mine and Andy's favorite wood of the year. We call it the golden retriever of wood. It just wants to make you happy. And it reminds us of mid-60s pattern grade mahogany. It's just that good. And so it just fits all of these, check boxes, like you say. Why should this guitar exist? Well, it sounds good. Two, it's a demonstration that you can actually put something on the regular menu. Every environmental tree has been, oh, we cut down this tree, made a limited edition, right? And so what I wanted to do with guitars is be a little bit more like Elon Musk was with electric cars. When he made a Tesla, it was a beautiful, sexy car, and it was electric. It wasn't like a not so beautiful and not so sexy car. It's like, oh, you drive an electric car, because it looks stupid, and all of a sudden the company, it was like form and function came together. And I don't really want to make a green guitar that doesn't live up to what a guitar should be. So that's that story there, and people love it. And if I didn't tell you anything about it, it'd just be a guitar.
It's a wonderful guitar. The Builder's Edition 324 CE. It features urban ash on the back and sides. So there you have it. 4 things you may or may not know, innovative things that are very important to Taylor guitars. The people of Taylor Factory, Andy Taylor Powers, and sustainability efforts that we're working on. And in episodes to come, we'll have more information about all this. But right now, we're going to do some rapid fire Q&A because that's why we came here. We had an awesome response to the email that went out to the launch or introduce this series that we're doing, and we got, I think right now north of 70 questions, emails sent in. We're gonna go with a couple, and then we're gonna get some off of the live feed right now. So, first question. This one's quick, easy. How long will it be until your manufacturing resumes? Patrick Dodge wants to know.
Patrick, yesterday we opened Tecate and we opened El Cajon. Everybody came back, and we have to creep our production up, right? Because it's a little bit hard to turn the ship around. But no, we're starting guitars like crazy, and everybody's back starting yesterday, and that was the 18th.
Wearing masks, socially distanced. We had to change some ways and some procedures.
We spent 8 weeks getting ready for that, and like I've never seen any place so antiseptic in my life.
You could probably right. We'll have very, very clean doorknobs, and we thank everybody who's helped do that. All right.
And by the way, everyone's thrilled to be back.
It's unbelievable. I had to go film Andy today, and there were so many happy hellos. We just wanted the guitar makers to get back to what they're doing. All right. So Peter Staskalis, I'm saying his name, butchering his last name, but I hope
Staskalis.
Is that what it is? Staskalis? Okay, cool. We got that. I know it's best for tone to have a thin finish. So why not make guitars without a gloss finish?
I would love to make more guitars with a gloss finish. Somebody discovered years and years and years ago that if you keep putting lacquer on a guitar and polish it, it looks really good. And then we had to suffer through that for a really long time. But our finishes are getting thinner all the time. So that's why we talk so much about the 3.2 finish that's on our 800 series or 600 series. That means it's 3.2 millimeter or 3.2 mils thick, not millimeters, mils. A mil is 1,000th of an inch, right? And so this finish is super thin. Typically on a guitar, 6 mils is the standard. I'm talking about a good guitar, not an everyday guitar. I'm talking about a good guitar. Good guitar makers would put 6 mils on the top, 8 mils on the back and sides. By contrast, say a Stratocaster's got 18 or 20 mils on it because that's not as important, right? Sure. On an electric guitar. Acoustic guitars are usually 6 and back and sides 8. Our most difficult finishes that we do right now are the 3.2, which is a little bit thicker than French polish, which is about 2. So it's 70% thicker, something like that. You might ask, how do we measure 3.2 thousandths? Well, we do it with a little Doppler radar film thickness tester. It's technology, man. You put it on and it tells you how thick it is. It's crazy. it's a little thing like a stethoscope, electronic, and it can measure that. And and then we have our technique down. A lot more guitars. The ironic thing is some of the simpler finished guitars that come out of Tecate have way less finish on them. Baby, GS Mini, 100 series. And then as they go up, they start getting a little bit more finish on them because the market kind of expects that. As we design new guitars, we always put thinner and thinner finishes on them all the time. And we move more and more away from gloss.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Alex sent in a question. I have short-ish fingers and would like to know how Taylor can help me move easier around up and down the frets. That goes back.
Yeah, the short scale guitars can be easier because it's amazing what happens when you take 3/4 of an inch, or we take 5/8 of an inch off of the total scale length. The frets are closer together. Lower action helps a lot, so you can always have your guitar tech adjust your guitar to the lowest action that you want to do. You can order a guitar with a 111/16 neck out of the El Cajon factory if you want an El Cajon guitar. All of the guitars in Tecate are 111/16. They're a little bit narrower. So those things can help you a lot. We can't make floating frets that adjust to your finger size. And I would say this, not meaning to be flippant, but some of the best guitar players I know have short, stubby fingers. So you're part of that too. And just have no fear. Practice, practice, practice. You can get there even with your fingers. Marry them to the guitar and try some short scale stuff. Narrow neck, short scale.
Would a 12 fret instrument help with that?
Yes.
Awesome.
So like a GC.
Yep.
Short scale 12 fret.
Yeah.
Boom.
Boom. Awesome. We have some great comments over here. We got a question. I don't know who asked it, but I copied it earlier in the conversation. What tone wood combo would Bob build for himself?
Well, that's going to change from year to year based on what I'm getting excited about. But I would probably say that right now, I would use Chamois Ash and Spruce.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It sounds so good.
Yeah.
It really, really sounds good. My guitar that I play, I don't play it as much anymore. It's sort of absconded and become a museum piece. But it's my 1978 810 that I made. It was our first scallop brace guitar that I made way back when I did that. And that guitar has been through thick and thin with me, and it's got holes in the side from pickup knobs that came in and came out, and it's got wear and tear on it. And I love rosewood and spruce too. But this Chamois Ash sounds good. Really good.
Awesome. We've had some really great comments over here. One comment that was awesome. Freedom to Ignite wrote, Paul Akers is how I found Taylor guitars. That's pretty cool.
Cool.
Paul Akers went on the World Forestry Tour with Bob. We have those videos on our YouTube channel. Factory was clean in September. Can't imagine the new level. Yeah. That's a good.
Well, it's antiseptic now. We not only swept it up, but we killed all those germs. Paul's a great friend of mine. I talk to him almost every day. He worked for me when he was 17 and I was 22 or 23. And he's definitely a good example of the student teaching the teacher, because his lean techniques and his business sense are really good. He's one of a kind. There's nobody in the world like Paul.
It's so awesome. So I got one more question from the feed over here, and everybody who's watching, know that we'll get in there later and we'll comment and we'll answer as we can go. There's a lot of you watching, and we really appreciate you hanging out with us for this last hour and some change. The question, good question by Gabe actually, and that was, I think he asked, it's way down here in the thing, what was your feeling the first time Andy showed you V-Class?
It was so early on. What people don't realize is he made the first V-Class guitar 5 years before we introduced V-Class. people are like, how's it going to hold up? Well, we've got some here that have been sitting around for 5 years. So we kind of know, we put it through all this stuff. And he had built this guitar that was made from blackwood,
Yeah.
right? Blackwood back and sides. I can't remember if it had a blackwood or mahogany top. And he had this idea, and it was before he really, really developed it. And he played it for me, and I'm like, oh, that sounds good. That sounds really, really good, Andy. And I'm going to tell you guys the very, very first thing that I noticed on that guitar. I said, there's no whoop, whoop, whoop. There's no warble. There's no whoop, 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 whoop between notes because of the intonation was so good. Then I looked at, and people get so freaked out when we say that the bracing made the intonation better. They're like, that's impossible. It can't be the key. But the top moves so much more orderly that the tops that we did before moved in more of a free-for-all type of emotion, and it would play notes that the strings weren't trying to play. And so this moves more orderly, and it doesn't give you those funny, you know how you play a E chord, you tune your guitar on your iPhone, you play an E chord, oh, that's good. You play an A chord and you're like, oh, that's sort of good. You play a D chord and oh, you got to reach up, and then you play a G, and pretty soon you kind of get it a little bit out of tune. And you're like, okay, I can go. It's sufficiently out of tune, right? And that never happens. That's the first thing I noticed. And then the next thing is like, is this going to hold up, Andy? And he goes, well, I think so. But we were patient. We waited 5 years. It hung on walls. It got played. And I looked at the top and I said, is it weak? Is it strong? He made a couple adjustments after that to make it like it is now, just a little bit stronger. But it didn't blow me away because it was the earliest prototype, just slipped in, here's something I'm working on. By the time it was developed, and I really knew what I was looking at.
Love it, love it, love it. All right, we're gonna tighten this. We're gonna steer this ship into port real quick. The last segment of this show, Taylor Primetime, is what we call. We should have some sound effects, Sharpie, but we'll get into that.
We'll make some. Yeah.
It should be like dun dun dun. Or
hey,
something.
You guys, I saw this. I listened to this podcast, or maybe it was an interview about people who design sound effects.
Yeah.
And how much you're like the whoa that your computer comes on, or your that a thing comes on, all these things that have something to do with your thing. And people pay millions of dollars for that stuff.
Totally.
It's like, it blew my mind. So Sharpie, you have to do it for free.
Yeah. This one's for free.
Yeah, this one's for free.
I mean, if it just goes boink, 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 that's good enough with me.
Yeah.
Because that's what most of them are in the end.
Totally. All right. This segment of the show, before we wrap up, is called Sharpie's Question.
Bum, 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 bum.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, cool. Got it.
He has worked at Taylor Guitars for almost 12 years. And Sharp, it is your turn to ask our wonderful guest, Mr. Bob Taylor, a question you've always wanted to ask.
Somebody already asked that question that we touched on, so I'm going to move it around a little bit. Bob, I have worked for you for going on 12 years. I've never asked you this before. Me personally, my dream Taylor guitar, if I could have one Taylor for the rest of my life, changes just about once a month.
Yeah.
Right now, it's the Builder's Edition 324. I think that guitar is incredible. We were talking before we went live. I was born severely left-handed. We don't have those in lefty yet, but one day. Right now, if you could grab one guitar from the shop, take it home and play it, and never touch another Taylor guitar again, what model would that be?
814 CE.
Right. Oh.
That's
Solid
what I'd take.
choice.
That's your baby, isn't it?
Do you want me to? Okay. You know what do they say when you give a speech? You tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them. So, so 814 CE is I'm telling you what I'm going to tell you. If you want, I'll tell you now. I like that for a bunch of reasons. 800 series, warm place in my heart. You know, my 1978 guitar that I told you guys about, it was an 800 series guitar, right? The Grand Auditorium was the guitar that I think took Taylor to where they are. It's probably I might venture to say it's the second most copied guitar shape in the world, the first being a Martin Dreadnought. But we're coming up on their heels, because all I got to do is walk through the Shanghai Music Trade Show, and it's like A14 Taylor Grand Auditorium Cutaway. Everywhere you look, that shape is there. It's just there, just straight up copied. But that was the first shape that I designed that I really felt like it was my shape. It's like, that's when my design sense came around. And the first one came out on our 20th anniversary. And so it's got that going for it. I love its tone. I love the CE part, because we started putting cutaways and pickups on guitars early on in our development. And it's really part of what brought Taylor to into the industry and allowed us to have something to say, because a lot of people just really weren't ready to put pickups on their acoustic guitars. So we got quite a jump on that. So all of that whole thing that embodies that. Not only that, I love playing that guitar. It sounds so Taylorish to me. But the other thing I love about it is when I look inside, I see Andy Power's signature. And my signature has kind of become a watermark in the back. I see a black nut at the top of the fretboard, which means it's a V-class guitar. And it's the new version of that guitar, all redone by Andy. And it's everything on that guitar just comes together for me.
It's awesome. Love it.
So awesome. Sharpie's question was answered, and I was able to mention in here, boom, the answer's in. Bob Taylor loves the 814 CE. Everyone wants to know. So shout out to everybody who spent time with us. I want you guys to know, this is kind of cool. The three of us sat here in our respective areas, socially distanced, and we kept this thing live with north of 100 people watching the entire time.
Wow.
Very much. I'm looking at your comments and everything over here. Thank you. Tobias jumped on, and Gabe was here, and Jeannie and Zebo and all these folks. Merle, thank you guys for jumping on. I hope to see you next episode. Next episode is 2 days from now. All right. 2 days from now, we are going to be talking about, why does the shape of an acoustic guitar matter? It's a question that Sharpie's had forever. It's a question that I've had, and it's really going to be fun to talk about that. May 21st, 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Central, 9 Eastern, and 1 a.m. Universal time. We had an email from somebody who said, why don't you tell us Universal time? It's easier for the rest of the world to join in. So I guarantee that somebody is watching from another part of the world, which is fantastic. Thank you very much. So we'll be back here on Thursday with our special guest, Andy Lund. Sharpie and I enjoyed the time with you tonight, Bob. Thank you so much. The inaugural first episode of Taylor Primetime.
Cool. Hey, can I make a little commitment?
Sure.
Suggestion/commitment. Let's do a show with me sometime, whenever you're ready, that the whole show is rapid fire questions.
I'm down.
Yes.
Bob live.
Where we just take readers' questions and we give quick answers to them, and answer as many questions as we possibly can, without tons and tons of storytelling.
I'm down for that. That is exciting.
Right.
That's awesome. I'm taking that back to the marketing team. We're going to go live with that, and we're going to plan it.
Okay.
I'll make a sound bit for it, right? So I'm like, beep, 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 all some cool noises, and we'll get a good time, like a countdown thing. Like, how many can we do in 45 minutes?
Yeah, you guys have something where you you also have to play me out. If I'm going long, you got to play me out.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. I know we went a little bit long this first time. We were prepared for it because we had you on the show. Thank you very much, everybody who watched. Jim, thanks. Thanks back. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And you know what? We'll see you next time on Taylor Primetime, Thursday, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Thanks, y'all.
Right on. Have a good night.
Your sign.
Okay, bye-bye.